Hi everyone, good afternoon. We're 2 minutes in, so I guess we can get started. Right, I guess we've got a pretty small crowd today as well, so I guess we can try and make it interactive. If you guys got any questions, just feel free to pop in the chat. Right, let's get started then. So, welcome everyone. Thanks for making the time for today's session, A Tale of Two APIs. In case any one of you here today is expecting to hear a story from me, well, sorry to disappoint, that's not going to happen today. But I think I've got something better. So instead of hearing me tell the story, today we're going to script a story, right? A story called A Tale of Two APIs. And it's kind of a I don't know, that joke, get it, script is a live coding event. So we're actually going to script a tale about two very different APIs. So by way of introduction, my name is John Lim, and I'm a senior solutions engineer at Offshore. My role at Offshore is primarily to help customers be successful with their identity initiatives. And I do hope that, sometime in the future here, I may work with you on this journey as well. So from an agenda point of view, let's click through that. Let's start with the plot of the story, right? What are we going to script here today? And because we'll be using Auth0 to do a lot of the heavy lifting today, I'll spend 2 minutes introducing, who Auth0 is, what we do, just in case the first time some of you are hearing about Auth0. And then we'll jump right into the live coding or scripting session. And if we have time remaining and kind of running a tight schedule here, happy to take any questions. Right. Let me just skip through the next slide. All right. So our protagonist today is a person called Bob. Oops, sorry. Let me just do that. Right. Today is a user called Bob, and he's a crypto trader and is actually using a crypto trading application. And in the app, right, once you're authenticated into it, the application calls to kind of different APIs there, right? Both are private APIs, which means they aren't public, which means that you have to have some be authenticated before you can call those APIs. But one of them, the more general private ones, probably more for things that aren't so security sensitive, like maybe just pulling in real-time data prices of the crypto, and more private scoped on some of the higher sensitive operations like maybe placing an order. The antagonist of the story, right, is a hacker, right? And that somehow got control of Bob's computer there, right? He could have left his laptop open in a coffee shop, but for all purposes, the hacker got hold of Bob's session. So let's actually play the hero here and foil the hacker's attempt at executing trades via this private scoped API. All right, I'm just looking and seeing the chat. Right, if you've got any questions, again, got a small crowd, so feel free to drop in. I'll check periodically if you guys got any questions. All right, so moving on, right? So what materials do we need to script this story today? Right? First, we need a web app, right, to simulate the web trading application there, and we need to add authentication on top of it, right? So the user has to authenticate before they have access to the web application. We also need a backend that has supports two different endpoints, APIs, and we need to implement authorization for this backend as well. Right, and so to achieve, all these in the next, I guess, about 40 minutes that we have, right, we have to do this in really quick time. So we're going to leverage Auth0 for this, do a lot of the heavy lifting. So for all of you that's unfamiliar with Auth0, here's just a really quick introduction of what Auth0 is. So Auth0 is a service, right, for application builders to authenticate and authorize users into their applications. So if you look at this diagram, right, Auth0 sits between your applications here on the left and the various ways that a user can, or channel that a user can log in by into your application, right? So for example, we support, if you you're building out a web app, mobile app, machine, or IoT devices, and you needed a way to allow your users to log in by maybe your own custom database, a social connection, or if you're supporting B2B customers, their corporate IDP. So Offshore sits there, making it very easy for you, very seamless to allow those users in these directories to log in into your applications, right? But apart from just that middle layer there, allowing helping you to get connected, your users connected to your apps, right? We also made the platform extensible. So what that means is that you could, by means of just writing your own simple JavaScript, extend and customize the behavior of your authentication journey as well. And we're going to see a little bit of that in today's coding session as well. All right. Let me just quickly check. Any chat, any questions? No, seems like we're all good. Okay, so in today's session, what we're going to do, all right, we're first of all going to create an Auth0 tenant. And then we use it to create and configure an application, right, to use Auth0 for authentication. We then create a set of APIs, register with that with Auth0 to implement authorization. And then, the final step there is really to thwart the hacker's attempt at, placing orders or placing trades for Bob. And that is to actually implement Step-up MFA, right? Step-up multi-factor authentication. And then see that all in action. All right, so to get started, let's create an Auth0 tenant. So all you have to do is go to your browser, pop up to auth0.com, right? And just hit that sign up button. Right, in case you guys haven't used or don't have an Auth0 account, simply head to auth0.com, sign up with one of your social login providers there, or just your email and a password. And once you sign up for an Auth0 account, Auth0 will direct you to create an Auth0 tenant, right? So I've got one kind of existing here, but what you see once you create an account is that Auth0 will ask you to create an Auth0 tenant. And what you see here is part of our public cloud offering, which means also that we have a private instance, private deployment model as well. But for today's demonstration, we're going to go ahead with the public cloud environment. And you can see that we support Australia, Europe, Japan, and the US region in a multi-tenanted public cloud environment. So all you have to do is create an Auth0 tenant, right? Is just give it a name. In the case that call it Apidays, and probably today's date 2022. April 20th, right? And hit create there. That should be done. And that's it, right? So the very first step that we've done is the live coding session, to create an Auth0 tenant. And that's it. Right. The next step we need to do is to create and configure an application to use Auth0 for authentication. So if I come back to the dashboard here, right? This is the Auth0 management dashboard. This where you configure your Auth0 tenant, right? What we're going to do, we're just going to applications here, right? To actually register our application. So we haven't got an existing application. We'll kind of use a quick start for it. But over here, we're just going over to applications and we're going to create an application. And you can see that Auth0 actually supports a wide range of application types for your native apps, single page web apps, regular web apps, as well as machine-to-machine applications. So let's give it a name, right? Let's say the crypto trading app, right? And we're going to build a single page app today. Go ahead and create there. And Auth0 out of the box actually supports something like 64 ready-to-use quick starts and SDKs. So for single page apps, we do support 4 different tech stacks here: Angular, JavaScript, React, and Vue. We're going to build a React app today, right? Single click React there. And Auth0 gives us a couple of options, right? So it's asking all these questions essentially to guide us on how to integrate our applications with Auth0, right? And to set up the tenant configuration. And once you select a tech stack, we're presented with a couple of options. The first is if you have an existing app, then Offshore provides step-by-step instructions guiding you how to integrate your applications with Auth0, right? But in our use case today, we're going to actually download the sample app that Offshore provides here and use it to simulate the plot of our story here today, which is a crypto trading app. So I'm going to hit download sample here, right? And it's giving us a couple of instructions. Most, as you can see, it's asking us to configure a number of settings. Essentially, these are just addresses that we need to whitelist, right? So that Offshore can actually make sure that the correct applications are calling Offshore. So I'm going to copy that, right? I'm going to hit download there, right? Okay, download the sample app, but we also need to set up this to register this registered application in Auth0. I'm going to set the allowed callback URL, the allowed logout URL, as well as the allowed web origin. Just a quick side note here, because if we were to run our app on localhost, just because Auth0 treats localhost kind of a little bit differently, there might be some constraints, right? So what I'm going to do is I have an alias for my localhost, right? And we've got to run it over a secure local dev environment. So I'm just going to just replace that with my alias there. Right? So put that there. Allowed logout URL. Oops, so let's just make sure I copy that correctly. Put in there. Right, and hit save changes. All right, so now if I were to pop over to my terminal, right, let's take a look at this one here. Let's actually now just move the downloaded sample app. I'm sorry, what's called React, right? Right, over to this directory here and unzip it. I just clean up these unzip file. Okay. Just seeing if so everyone okay making sense so far. All right. Okay, and now let's see. So we have created a tenant to download the sample application. So now let's actually install it. All right. All right. Oops, sorry. Sample. Install it. I can check what's installing. Just quickly check any questions. Oh, all good. Just feel free to all right. Afraid that was going to happen with running downloading that as well as video and all the traffic. It's going to take a while, but it should be quick. All right, awesome. All right, so it's installed. Let's actually now, oops, run it. Right, and just like that. Let's actually wrong screen. Okay, right, this actually now is running on actually localhost. Right, a little bit. So starting, yeah. As you can see, we got the sample app up and running, and we try to log in. Right, notice that something goes wrong, and that's because we kind of didn't whitelist, again, for security reasons. We didn't whitelist the local host, and that's why it's actually reporting an error. So as you can see here, it's saying that, callback URLs mismatch. We're calling from localhost 3000, but that's not in the list of allowed callback URLs. So let's actually head back to our application and fix that, right? So to actually allow this to run over, HTTPS, we just need to add in an environment file. Right, if we put the my memory serves me correctly, HTTPS equals true, and host equals, in this case, that would be my alias there. Save the file, npm restart it. Right, if I head back into my application here, let's go with my website there, right? And it's going to say proceed to my website there. Right, and now I'm going to try to log in. So it's not found. There's got to be something. Just check. Some caching error. All right, that's not good. Let me just try it one more time. Now let me just make sure I clear the cache as well. Yeah, maybe like this. This not found my backend state. Okay, let's really quickly. Let me just. Okay. So I'm just looking at my. What happened? Simple. Okay. So just opening my IDE here. Shouldn't there be anything really? So it's the file, but why is it calling my backend there? It's Apidays. Right. Let's just see what. Offshore config. Right, that's strange. So it is calling. Huh. Sure why is that's the case. Yeah, but it shouldn't be like that. Did I copy the wrong file? Okay, well, let's show you guys. Just give me 1 minute. Pressure of live coding. Yeah, it seems alright. Just not sure why offshore config there was kind of updated there. Alright, but this should work now. Let me just come back here into the app. Login. Okay. And just like that, we have authentication for application. So we don't actually have an existing user. All right, so let's actually click sign up there and sign up with an email there. right? Right, so just like that, we've used Offshore, created a sample application and integrated and have using its SDKs, we've implemented authentication. So coming back here, right, you can see here that yep, we've enabled and integrated Offshore to the application. One thing that you would note that once I've logged in, the user profile, the application has information about the user. And so how will how is this happening or what happens during authentication? So let me take a step back and kind of peel back the covers or layers of what is happening when you use Offshore for authentication. So this is a typical scenario, kind of similar to what we have now, right? We have a single page app here and we have an existing user here, navigates to the web app and tries to log in. And the user, the application, when the user tries to log in, is actually then redirected to Auth0, where Auth0 is handling that authentication request. And when the user credentials are valid, right, Auth0 will actually, right, this is an ID token, will return an ID token back to the application, proving that the user is who he say he is and authenticating the user, granting access to the application. And so that's what is happening. And so when I authenticated Auth0, I got back an ID token that contained all these information. And we can actually inspect and take a look at this ID token. So to do that, I just have to pop back over to my IDE here and just make a little change in index.js there. Right? And you can see here that if and this is this part of code, right? This sample app here, app.js, index.js is just setting up the configuration parameters, for your Auth0 tenant. And what I'm going to do here is say for the app, I just want to use the cache location, right? And set it to local storage, right? And so that let us actually debug the application. So it's compiling again. Let me hit back here, refresh. And if I take a look at my application local storage, right, you can see as part of that now is storing something called an ID token. And we can take this, pop over to jwt.io there, for example, and copy paste it over there. And you can see what is returned to the application. So we call the JSON Web Token. It contains a header containing how the signature was computed, right? The payload of the ID token, in this case, my name, my email, right, etc. So that's kind of how it works under the covers, right? Auth0 returns to the user as part of OAuth2 or OpenID Connect an ID token, and that's how we know that the user is logged in. So really quickly, coming back here, like I said, we've covered, creating an Auth0 tenant. We very quickly created an application and integrated it with Auth0 for authentication. So the next part of the story, and to script it out, is that we need to create a set of APIs and register that with Auth0 for authorization. Just looking at time, got 20 minutes. I'm going to probably speed through this. All right, so let's actually create and register APIs with Auth0. So it's kind of similar. Let's head back to the Auth0 dashboard here. I'll just speak a little bit quicker, just because we probably run out of time. Let's actually also register these sets of APIs with Auth0. All right, so head back to the dashboard there. Under APIs, let's create an API. And we can just call it here, say, backend, for example, and give it an identifier. In this case, I'm just going to call it my backend, right? And click create there. Right? And once you created or registered for your API, right, you just got to go into the settings here where I can just quickly walk you through what you can do with it. Right? You can actually customize your token expiry. So given that it's probably going to be a sensitive operation, I'm not going to make it really long-lived, 90 seconds. And you can also enable things like role-based access controls if you wanted to as well. Right? But for the purpose of this, we're just going to use the default. We also need to specify what scopes or permissions this backend actually supports. So in this case, let's say, this API, the user can actually place an order, right? So we'll set that permission as well. And click add there. So now we kind of registered that, that the API, we need to actually create the API. And for this, I'm just going to use at offshore.com this quick start as well for backend APIs. Let me actually just switch my tenant. And that would be this one. Switch it, and then we can also download sample apps for the APIs as well. Right, so backend API there. I'm gonna go with Node. Click that, and again, gives you kind of two sets of instructions. One is how to integrate an existing backend if you have, but we're going to use the sample app here. I'm going to select it for my backend there and click download. Right. So as that's downloading, let me head back. Just check my notes as well, see if I missed any step. All right. Okay. So let me go back to the terminal. Let me actually just open a separate terminal window there. And actually create a directory called backend, right? And actually move that downloaded file, which is Node.js. Node.js there, move it here and unzip it one more time, right? Okay, and let's actually run that. And while it's actually installing that, we can very quickly, right, just take a look at the source code for this backend as well. So I go into the server code here. What this backend does is that it just has kind of three routes there, right? We have a public API, which means that you can actually view the resource behind this without being authenticated. We have a set of API that requires you to be authenticated before you can see this message. Right, and we have something we call private scope, which means kind of elevated permissions, something more sensitive there that requires the permissions there. So let's actually correct this, right? Because our required scope here that we said was to place order, right? And also just to make sure that, for this demonstration, we are actually going to just avoid CORS or allow CORS, right? So we're just going to make those changes there as well. All right. Yep. All right. And with that, let me just hit the terminal. That's okay. Let me now run. Oh, sorry. npm start. Start. Is it running? Yep. So let me go localhost, create public API there, for example. So with the API now backend now running, you can see if I go to the public public endpoint, we can see the message. If I were to go private, right, it's unauthorized, and that goes the same for private scoped endpoint as well. So if I come back to a live coding session, we've created the APIs and we've registered with Offshore here for authorization already. Let me just quickly check chat if there's any questions. Okay. Okay. So we can see from the browser here, you can access those APIs and block on those private ones in our app, right? There's also a route here called external API, right? And you can see here that there is some information saying that, it's not allowing us to ping this API. So let's actually modify our application and actually call these APIs. But just before I get, proceed with that, let's just head back here again just to understand what's going on, what we're about to do. So quick recap, we have a single page application. We integrated with the Offshore SDKs via the quick start, and using Offshore for authentication. So user authenticates, gets back an ID token, all in well, he's logged in into the application. However, for the application now to call the set of APIs, the backend will be expecting what we call an access token, right here with this logo here. So when the user now needs to make an authorization request to Auth0, specifying that it needs an access token to call my backend API, right? So make a call to Auth0, specifies the audience or the API that it wants to call, and Auth0 will then return it an access token to the application, which the application can then pass in the HTTP call to the backend server. The backend server will actually validate to check if this access token is valid, and if it is, it will then render or respond with the appropriate resource. So that's what's going to happen. So let's now actually modify the application, right, to actually request from Auth0 for this access token. So coming back to the app, it's my IDE here. I'm going to pop over to the front end application, and where we'll change is this external API route here, right, in the application. So if I were to, first thing I need to update here is to actually call the correct API, right? And this is on localhost 3010. So I'm going to set that up. And the route, if I could scroll down here, is making to API, and let's call it private, right? Okay, so I've done that, and I need to specify the audience as well. So I'm going to do that. For some reason, this file was pre-populated with my backend, but that's the audience that we actually want, right? And it was an erroring out because earlier there wasn't such an audience on Auth0, then it was responding with an error. So let me put this back. If it's spelled properly, right? Okay, so let's hit back there, recompiling the app. If I hit back over and refresh, right, you can see now the warning's gone, and I can ping the API. Right, and it's responding an error, no applicable key found in JSON web key set. So I'm just suspecting that my backend, somehow the code, and let me just check this, client ID is indeed the correct one in my tenant. So let me just hit back there, APIs. Yeah, what is actually the client ID here? So this is, oh no, sorry, the application, right? Crypto trading app, yeah, this seems all right. PWE, so yeah, that's right, that's my backend. I think I got it. So let me, did I actually save my API? Probably did. Okay, so I think what's happening here, let me just log out again and log in, because it didn't actually have a valid access token at that point. So let me just log in again. Sorry, Offshore.com, and yeah, log in. Okay, let's go external API. Let's ping the API one more time. No applicable. Somehow it's not decoding. Okay, let me just double check and take a look at. All right, so you can see local storage. Wow, Okay, we got an audience. We're also getting back an access token now, but somehow my backend is not properly, okay, doesn't have the private, the public key, I'm thinking. So, right, so you can see that it is giving me back an access token. I'm calling the backend API, right? And you can see here unauthorized. Let me just cancel that. Right. Maybe have to spin up a separate one. So just quickly 1 minute. This is backend. Let me check the code. My backend code here. Server environment. And yeah, I don't know why this is. Might have just unpacked the wrong one. Okay, the URL there is wrong, so it's really API days. Today's date, it should be like that. Okay, so let me restart that. Alright, and if I were to go back into my app here, hopefully now it pulls in. Okay, so it's probably the wrong sample app. Makes sense, right? Because I downloaded a sample and also configured it for, as you can see when I was preparing for uh, this application. So I actually, let me just really quickly fix this, right? So API dates, it should be really this one. What I might do is I might just have to clean that one out again, download the node, just make sure, yep, I'm in the correct tenant, download the sample one more time. All right, so let's fix this on the fly. All right, and then let's copy it from our downloads folder one more time. Node. Okay, speeding this. Zip. This is outside, that's all right. Okay, and npm install one more time. And it just probably very quickly, right? You can see that the file, we're gonna move it outside here, server.js. So let's quickly fix that while it's installing. Set it to true, and also credentials true. Right, 12 of course, and over here the private scope, what we said was to place order. Okay, that should be it. All right, and then let me go back terminal, npm start. Okay, back to the app. Right, so it should actually, let's ping the API. Still giving me no website. Okay, so what I'm going to do, just as backup in the interest of time, for 9 minutes left, really quickly, let me just actually switch over to something that I prepared beforehand. Actually, you know, yeah, it's practice. So live coding, there you go. Right, so see, let me go into my API days there, API days there, APIs, that's the directory I want. Right, so API day is still there, right? Okay, and this is my backend. Let's start that. Right, so we're back to where we were. About all these with all the code already in there. Okay, okay. So I guess for 9 minutes, what I'm going to do really speed through this. Let me just log out again. Log in. Right. And now if I were to call backend API, okay, what this does is that, okay, this is actually the end of the demonstration. But let me kind of walk you through before I do all these things, right? So, all right. So quick recap, if you just come back here and we kind of ignore, what was happening there previously, but we created an Offshore tenant, we created an application and authentication, and kind of, we're creating the API, registering for authorization. Offshore was giving back an access token, which currently the backend API is saying that that's not valid, and this maybe just some public key that's getting from the wrong place and can't validate that signature, right? But with kind of 7 minutes left on the clock for today's session, kind of assume, that now we can call the API. The next thing, I guess, looking at this, the plot of the story today is that now a hacker actually got access to Bob's session, right? And he can call these APIs and there's nothing to stop him. So in comes here, I want to talk about how we can block such attempts using MFA, and not just typical MFA, but contextual MFA, which means that only in specific contextual situations will the user be prompted for MFA. So how this is done, and I just hope to switch to the correct hand now. Let's go walk you through how that is done in Offshore. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make sure I switch back to the correct right tenant here now. Right, and so the first thing you need to do is to make sure that you go into the dashboard and enable MFA. So in Offshore, that's as simple as just going over to security, multi-factor authentication, and you can see that we support a wide range of MFA factors, right? WebAuthn, FIDO security keys, Google Authenticate or similar. And what I've done here in this original demonstration was to enable SMS, right? So I enabled the phone SMS, right? And what happened there was that when, and I previously enrolled the user for MFA. The next thing is that once you define what factors you want to enable, the next step is just simply to define the policy that you want to trigger MFA. And in this case, we could use Offshore's internal risk engine that kind of determines if it's a risky authorization request, we can trigger MFA, or always, which is kind of a high friction and legacy way of doing MFA. But for today's session, for this very specific use case of blocking the attempt to call that endpoint, we're going to use never and actually designate when we will trigger using an Offshore rule. And an Offshore rule, you can think of it like a serverless function. It's custom JavaScript snippets of code that you can write that will be executed as part of the authentication pipeline. So in this case, when the application, let me step back here, when Bob is trying to make call this API private scope API with the permissions place order, right? That's going to tell Auth0, hey, this is a sensitive operation. Let's trigger MFA, right? And so in this case, if I fall back over the Auth0 dashboard, you can see here that I have set up an Auth0 rule. I'm going to step on it and just show you what a rule is. And you can see here that the rule takes in a user object. Right, it's just JavaScript function, has a user object that contains information about the user, a context object that contains contextual information about the current authentication or authorization request. And you can see here I've written some custom JavaScript code. It looks at the request, right, coming in, it looks at the scope, and you can see that we've actually requested for scope to place order. And that's how it tells, Offshore here, hey, this is a sensitive operation. let's actually step up or trigger MFA. And that was what is happening. And so when I go into the app here, when I'm logged in, this is my here. Okay, when I'm logged in, right, and I try to call the API here, right? What happens here? It was if I open the network traffic, right? You can see it's actually making an authorization request, right, over here to Auth0, and that. Oh, what's this? I think everything's not working correctly today, but it was triggering earlier, right? So let me just make sure I got this one, right? And so, while testing this out earlier as well, I tried to make maximum number of times, didn't pass, and it's kind of just warning me that I've run out of, the free SMS that I can for MFA for the free trial version. So that's essentially what's happening. And I guess it wasn't a very good session today. But with 2 minutes left on the clock, I guess, it's just to kind of round up, I wanted to probably just summarize today's session. We started off with a story that we wanted to script out. It does take a bit longer than expected. And essentially, we had a user using a crypto trading application they call the backend APIs, right? And to prevent, takeover attempts, etc., to increase the security, we can actually use Auth0 and decide when and how we want to trigger MFA, right? In this case, when Bob is trying to place some orders through a private scoped API, we actually triggered that MFA bit. And it's all just done using the extensible points of the platform, creating an Auth0 rule. Auth0 is triggered, and in this case, that's when we can actually then trigger MFA. So like so, and then the user will have to enter, the 6-digit and get sent, and then after that, he can actually access the call the API. So, yep, that's it. I guess we've 1 minute left on the clock. Is any questions? Anything in chat? Right. So if you guys have any questions, I would recommend, I guess, you reach out. Probably stay in the chat a little bit in the partners village there of Auth0, just so they can run through the finer details of today's workshop, which unfortunately had some problems. Yeah. All right. In that case, just in the respect of other speakers' time and holding a workshop roundtable as well, I thank you for your time. And if you want to reach out, my email's here, johnlin.lin@auth0.com. Happy to take any questions. And like I said, I'll be in the chat as well. Thanks everyone for your time.